Last week, Israel murdered the captain of the Palestine national football team. Nobody gave a fuck amongst the upper reaches of the football world. Not FIFA, not UEFA, and no single prominent footballer until Mohamed Salah, somewhat belatedly but brilliantly, spoke out. But only Mohamed Salah, nobody else. No Leo Messi, no Cristiano Ronaldo, none of the legion of Arab and Muslim footballers playing in the top leagues of the European continent said anything at all. Not even condolences, never mind a condemnation. And today was buried Mohamed Salah, a giant Palestinian basketball player from the national basketball team. And as I said, at this moment in time, not a single star of the NBA, not anyone who's anyone in the world of basketball has even lamented the passing of one of their fellow sportsmen. And definitely the basketball authorities in the world are not likely to be more proactive in taking action against Israel than the football authorities were. Donald Trump sent 6 warships and 1 submarine off the coast of Venezuela this morning. What's that about? Well, he doesn't rule out a boots-on-the-ground invasion of the vast territory of Venezuela with its government, which, let me put it this way, would be itching for a fight with the 4,000 US Marines that Donald Trump has on board these warships. He hasn't ruled out, Donald Trump, a landing, boots-on-the-ground invasion. All in the interests of fighting the drug cartels, of course. Nothing to do with the fact that Venezuela is the world's largest oil-producing country, and that Venezuelan oil is perfectly suited to the American refinery market. Nothing to do with creating yet another war when the wars he's already deeply involved and implicated in are, despite his repeated protestations, not yet resolved. We'll be watching that one closely, but Donnie, take it from me, as someone who's been to Venezuela many times, as someone who knows the prevailing atmosphere in Venezuela rather well. The worst thing you could do is put American boots on the ground in Venezuela, because be sure the boots will be empty before you can say Jackie Robinson. And the previous occupants of those boots will be being shipped back to the United States in wooden boxes. Speaking of which, the 7 dwarfs who accompanied Snow White, if you get my drift, Volodymyr Zelensky, into the lion's den in Washington, D.C. just a couple of days ago were, well, humiliated is not really the word, is it? I mean, when you compare and contrast even the Angela Merkel days, when she was photographed angrily confronting a Donald Trump visibly moving backwards in his chair, such was the ferocity of her assault. The 7 dwarfs sat like Dumpy, Dozy, Grumpy, and the rest. And when they did speak, they served only to make a fool of themselves. Let me deal with the situation, though, that their visit has resulted in. It was clear when Donald Trump left Alaska that the Ukraine war was on its way to a solution. All he had to do was impose that solution on Volodymyr Zelensky, which I have no doubt, given the difference in stature of the two men, he could easily have done. Whilst Zelensky was being berated and was being cajoled by Donald Trump into doing what's necessary, the 7 dwarfs were nursing their wrath outside, and little Zelensky knew it and therefore played hardball, because he knew that he was not quite alone. if Donald Trump had done what he no doubt promised Vladimir Putin that he was going to do, then we might well be talking tonight about an end to the Ukraine war, but we are not. We are instead talking about the dangerous maneuvers on which these 7 dwarfs have now embarked, and which endanger not just the people of Ukraine, but the people of all of Europe, and beyond that, the whole of the world. What do I mean? Well, Trump, under pressure from the dwarfs, has conceded that European NATO members can and should take up their places on the Ukrainian front line as a kind of tripwire, as a kind of security guarantee, they call it. Though in truth it's a guarantee of total insecurity. It's a guarantee that the war will never end. And if it ended, would only be a precursor of the war to come. Because Russia has made it clear from the very beginning and before the beginning of this phase of the NATO-Russia war, fought over the bodies, dead bodies, 1 million dead Ukrainian bodies, that no NATO army will be permitted next door to Russia in Ukraine. That is the reddest of red lines. It's the hardest of all red lines. And whether they're badged as NATO armies or as British armies, French armies, German armies, Danish armies, Dutch armies, or the yapping chihuahuas of the Baltic states, if they're in NATO and they're in Ukraine, then NATO is in Ukraine. And that will be the cause, immediately, of a general European war. Now, that much any idiot can understand. And there are a large number of idiots, as latest opinion polling makes clear, who have no idea who's who, what's what, when was when in the Ukraine conflict. But any idiot can understand this. If a country's army, which is a country in NATO, sets foot in Ukraine, there will be an all-out European war. This much is obvious. But when I tell you the next bit, a very large number of people begin to push back at me. I'm telling you that that general European war would have to become a nuclear war. Why? Because when one side or the other began to prevail, the side that was losing would have to have recourse to nuclear weapons rather than face, if it was the NATO army, the cataclysmic humiliation of actual defeat at the hands of Russian arms, or if it was the Russian side against whom the situation was prevailing, it would be existential. Russia's entire existence would be in peril, in danger, if a NATO army, British, German, French, Danish, Dutch, if that army began to prevail against Russia on a conventional battlefield, what do you think Russia would do? What would any nuclear-armed superpower do when being defeated on its own territory, on its own threshold? That much surely is obvious. And if it's not obvious to you, I'm here to tell you, listen to me. If a general war begins between Russia and these European members of NATO, it inevitably will turn nuclear. And then, what next? Well, it goes without saying that in a nuclear exchange, the country that was losing would have to step up the range and power of its nuclear weapons that it was deploying. And it would have to ask the United States of America to enter the war on its behalf. And if America entered the war on their behalf, then Russia would be at war with America. And would be talking not battlefield nuclear weapons, not intermediate range nuclear weapons, not nuclear war in Europe, but hypersonic, intercontinental, ballistic nuclear war across the oceans. Now, I then get some idiots who say, well, Britain's got nuclear weapons too, yes. And the British Trident submarines, if given permission from Washington, a key caveat, might well be able to fire off their nuclear weapons and would bring about huge death and destruction on the vast country of Russia, the biggest country in the world. But that would make no difference, even if the entire Russian leadership, military and political, was killed in their Situation Room, even if every one of the decision makers in Russia was killed by British submarines, Britain would still, moments later, cease to exist. Because the dead man's switch is already primed, and the weapons are already aimed at London, Glasgow, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds. Britain would cease to exist. Do you understand what I'm saying to you here? Do you understand how serious that is? And yet, knowing this, Keir Starmer, what was that big burst lip that he had, by the way, when he was in Washington? Mrs. Macron thump him? Or was he putting his mouth in places that it was unwise to put it? Keir Starmer is desperate to get, to quote the Defence Secretary John Healey, British boots on the ground in Ukraine. Well, I repeat what I said to you on Sunday. I really mean it. I mean it because I know it. Because I know the visceral hatred between Britain and Russia on both sides. Any British troops putting their boots on Ukrainian soil will be eliminated, annihilated. They will be destroyed before any other country's army. So why is the British Prime Minister continuing to shoot this breeze? Why is he the loudest voice in all of Europe demanding to put our young men in harm's way for little Zelensky? And for what side of a line? Slaviansk. Do you know it well, viewer? Or Kupiansk? Very important to you, viewer, should lie at the end when it comes of this conflict. Well, it might be because Keir Starmer is currently at 13% in the approval rating, the lowest approval rating ever recorded since records began. It could be because he's the most hated Prime Minister that Britain has ever had. More than Thatcher, more than Blair, the most hated ever Prime Minister. Donald Trump said that everybody likes him. He's doing a great job. Well, he can't really have meant that. It would either be a sign of cognitive decline or it would be a breathtaking act of sarcasm. But that might be why Keir Starmer's doing it. Or maybe he's worried about this oddly long-delayed trial of the Ukrainian rent boys that set fire to property belonging him. Maybe he senses that this is an existential matter for him. Maybe he senses that, having kicked the trial so far down the path it can barely be seen on the horizon, that when it eventually has to happen, unless something happens to the Ukrainian rent boys in between, that he has to pull the mother of all diversions out of his hat. Or it could just be that the British hatred of Russia has so consumed Whitehall, the Foreign Office, the Ministry of Defense, the deep state agencies, so consumed them that they are genuinely desperate to get into a firefight with the Russian Federation. But I don't need to stick only to Britain. I mean, is Macron's army going to fight the Russians? Going to fight them better than they fought the Nazis in 1940? Took Hitler 46 days to completely conquer France. Took Hitler less than 4 days, I've checked. 82 hours, to be precise, to conquer Mark Rutte's country's army of the Netherlands. Hitler was dancing on the Trocadero within 46 days. Have the French become very much more martial a race in the years since 1940? Well, they've killed a lot of tribesmen. They've killed a lot of African subjects in their colonial empire. They've killed a lot of people in sandals with Kalashnikovs in what they used to call French Indochina, but it's my guess that they would not fare well in World War III, in the great European war that their current posturing is literally inviting onto our path. I could say much more about the Europeans, but I've only got 2 minutes to say something about Trump. President Trump, I'm willing to believe that you're playing some 5D chess. I'm willing to believe that you're much cleverer than me. I'm willing to believe that all this willing like a dervish is just to confuse everybody, and that you actually do have an idea of what it is you're trying to achieve. But I have my doubts. And so they do in Moscow. You cannot say one thing to Vladimir Putin, and then when the 7 dwarfs sit on you, assume the shape that they have left upon you. You cannot tell the dwarfs that Russia is cool with European armies entering the theater of war in Ukraine when you already know that Russia has told you that that red line they will not allow anybody to cross. Any NATO army, however badged, however flagged, will be the cause of all-out war between Russia and the country in question. You know this. President Putin told you this. It wasn't lost in translation. You know it. But in telling the European leaders something diametrically different, you are risking the peace of the world. Never mind the Nobel Peace Prize. Stay tuned, we've got Max Blumenthal, the sage of Washington, D.C., up next. Stay tuned.